A little bit of time to be with you today. If you are a guest with us, welcome. We're glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us this morning for worship. You are honored guest among us. Hope that your time this morning is a blessing to you, and we're honored to have you in our presence today as we worship God together. You've noticed Scott hitting his mute switch some and coughing. I'm likely to do the same some during the sermon. It is just that season here in Oklahoma, isn't it? And for some of us, that season is recurring. We have that a lot. Some of us, it lasts a long time. So we'll just cough along together today. Hey, before we start the lesson, I want to let you know of something coming up in a couple of weeks that I'm excited about. You may have noticed in the past several years, well, first of all, for a long time at Memorial Road, we've had people here active in fostering and adoption. Many, many years, many heroes here that I look up to, and I'm thankful for that. And in the past decade or so, as some of the agencies that we know well, some of the foster and adoptive agencies, as it's worked out for them to contract out and have have people at those agencies do foster care on behalf of the state, that has sort of blossomed. So there's lots of folks here who have been doing foster care the past several years. That's just grown and grown. And we just thought it'd be a good idea to get that group together here at this church that keeps growing, and just to get to know one another, see how we can support one another, see what some next steps might be. We're real thankful for the agencies. Lilyfield has a strong history here, and some of us have done work with Lilyfield. Some of us have done work with other agencies. They have done a great job at supporting their people. We just kind of thought, what about the folks here at Memorial Road? Not to duplicate anything that's happening there, but just to get together and get to know one another and see how we could support each other in ways that make sense as part of church life. So on Saturday, November 11th, in the Summit from 3 to 5, we're just having a get-together. We'll have some snacks. There'll be a time for the smaller kids to play and to get our kids to get to know each other. We'll spend part of that time in some breakout sessions, too, just discussing among the different kind of subgroups as part of this, ways we might bless each other. So if you are fostering or have fostered, if you have adopted, if you yourself are adopted, if you have been involved in orphan care in other ways, we'd love to have you be there just for this informal gathering, just to do a sweep and see all the people at Memorial Road who are involved in this in ways we can support each other. After service, there'll be some folks at a table out in the lobby if you want to ask some questions about that and see just kind of how you might be involved in that. There'll be some people out there to answer those questions. But I'm excited about that. Don't you like getting invitations? I mean, isn't it fun to be invited to something? I mean, most of the time, right? But getting an invitation to an event is still exciting for us. For small kids, it's really exciting, right? To have a piece of mail, for instance, that comes for them, and you hand them that invitation, and it's maybe to a friend's birthday party. I've got 3 kids who are of the age to be getting a lot of those invitations. Now, I've heard of parents who do this. Sometimes they intercept those invitations if it's not going to make sense for their family schedule, and just don't pass that on. Because kids do get a lot of invitations. They could be at birthday parties every weekend, couldn't they? My kids really are excited to get invitations. And I'm thankful when they've got friends who want to invite them to things. I like getting invitations. We all like getting invitations, even if we have to say no. Because it makes us feel welcome. It makes us feel included. Being invited to something is, in general, a neat thing and an honor to us. Today we're going to finish up our sermon series called One Mission, One Person. And we're talking about inviting one. We've talked about other things like sharing with one and blessing one and praying for one. And we're going to end today with a practical call for you to invite one person. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about some stories from John. We're going to talk to one of our other staff members who became a Christian because of an invitation. And then I'm going to give you some practical ways and things you can invite someone to here and give you some hope and encouragement to do that. Listen, I'm not saying that getting people in a church building is the biggest aim we have. Okay? That getting them here is the only thing, or that getting them to attend a worship service is always the best first step. I'm not saying that. Especially in a room this size. Some of you are guests here today. Some of you were guests at one time. You know how intimidating a big group like this can be. There are certainly other entry points, and in fact, we're going to talk about that. So today's sermon is not only about inviting someone to worship as the first step. We're going to talk about lots of things. But inviting someone in general is a good first step. So I want to start by reading a few stories from John's Gospel where people have been invited, whether it's Jesus inviting them or others inviting people. I want to look at 4 stories and just get some lessons from those. And then we're going to talk to Jay Mack and hear his story. So let's start in John chapter 1, beginning in verse 35. First chapter of John, we've got John the Baptist on the scene. He's having to tell people already that he's not the Messiah, but in fact he's preparing the way for the Messiah. And so we pick up the story with John and some of his disciples standing around. Verse 35, the next day John was there again with 2 of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you going?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying and spent that day with him. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the 2 who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah," that is, the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. Come and see. Did you notice the flurry of action happening in this passage? People are going all over the place, and they're inviting each other. "Come and see, come with me, come over here." There's all these invitations, and people are just going. I want you to see that, listen, invitations are not always convenient. They're just not. They're not always convenient for the one doing the inviting. It's not always convenient for the one being invited. We know from the other Gospels even that when Jesus starts inviting people to follow him, they're literally dropping their work and going. This is not convenient, but this is serious, important stuff. When people are invited, you're asking for their time. You're asking them to take a risk. And that's okay, because this is important stuff. There are plenty of churches around, people. There are plenty of churches. If people already wanted to be at one, there's opportunity. So when you're asking someone to come do something at church, you are asking them to do something they probably hadn't thought about doing before. So yes, there's a little bit of inconvenience involved. You're asking for something a bit out of the ordinary from people when you invite them, but what we're talking about is important enough for that. It's important enough for people to be a little inconvenienced. It's important enough for you to be a little inconvenienced to take a risk. Invitations are not always convenient, but they're really important in our case. And then we skip over to chapter 4. And now Jesus is headed from Judea to Galilee, and he's got to stop in Samaria, which, as you may know, the Samaritans and the Jews didn't really like each other. There were some theological differences. There were some racial ethnic differences. They didn't quite get along. So to stop in Samaria was not quite the best idea at the time for a Jew. But Jesus wants to stop and get a drink. And as he stops there, his disciples go in town to get some food. And we pick up this story when his disciples return and see that Jesus has had a conversation with a woman at a well and he's revealed his knowledge of her past. He's revealed to her that he is the Messiah. So here we go with his disciples returning. Verse 27. They were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" They came out of the town and made their way toward him. And the thing I understand from this Samaritan woman is that when we encounter Jesus, we want others to have the same experience. Or we should want that. Look at how she says, "Come and see this man who did this for me." She wants them to experience that too. I want you to think about how following Jesus has been a blessing in your life. And I want you to think about how being a part of a church family has been a blessing to your life. Don't you want to give someone else a chance to experience that? Don't you want someone else to experience what you've experienced as a Christian and as a member of a church? Sometimes that even is the best way to invite someone, is to say, "Look, you know this is meaningful to me. This is an important part of my life, and it's been a blessing to me. Would you come and do this with me? Would you come to this service, this event? Would you come and be part of this thing that has been such a blessing to me?" It's a great way to invite someone and lets them know that you think what you're offering can be a blessing to them. But when we encounter Jesus, we want others to have the same experience. A little bit further in this story, the Samaritan people show up that she's invited. Verse 39 of chapter 4. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. "He told me everything I ever did." So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, "We no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world." And something I take away from this particular part of the story is that firsthand is better than secondhand. You've got friends and neighbors who have heard a lot about Jesus, good and bad. They've heard a lot about Christianity, good and bad. But maybe they've never experienced it for themselves, and they only know what they're getting told secondhand. Why not give them the opportunity to come and hear the gospel firsthand? They've heard about it plenty. What if they could come and hear it firsthand like these people who said, "We don't just believe this because of what you said. We believe it because we've heard the message directly." And the last part of John I want to talk about is at the end of the book. We're going to skip way ahead. After the crucifixion, after the resurrection of Jesus, Peter has denied Jesus 3 times after following him. And so now Jesus in chapter 21 appears to his disciples while they're fishing. He joins them for breakfast. And as breakfast ends, we get this conversation in John chapter 21, beginning in verse 15. When they'd finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." And again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The 3rd time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, "Follow me." Jesus has already invited Peter to follow him. This happened way earlier in the story of Jesus. But now he again says, "Follow me." You know, sometimes you have to re-invite people. You know people who used to be active at church. You know people in your Bible classes who used to be there a lot, and something's happened in their life They've encountered some difficulties. They've got some disappointments. And they're not around anymore. Sometimes a re-invitation can be a blessing to people. Hey, I don't know what's happened the past few years. We sure have missed you. Would you come try it again? We want you around. We miss you. We've noticed that you're not here. You're not invisible to us. Your presence is important. I mean, that's what happened with Peter. He gets another chance, right? He started out strong and some things happened. And here is Jesus, full of grace, saying, follow me. I think sometimes full of grace, we might again ask people, would you re-engage your faith? Would you come again and try? We want you around and we miss you. My mom has a story this way. She grew up in church, and then, as happens a lot in her young adult years, just kind of didn't go much anymore. Wasn't all that interested. And some older women from the church where I grew up said to her one day, young lady, you need to get yourself back in church. Now listen, that exact phrase isn't going to work for everyone. Okay? But it worked for my mom. And one of those ladies is still around today, and I'm thankful for her. I'm here. I get to do what I do. But more importantly, I'm a follower of Jesus in part because someone told my mom, you need to get back in church. They re-invited her. Don't give up on people. Don't give up on people. Maybe they need a re-invitation. I am right now, for just a few minutes, going to invite Jay Mack on stage. Jay is one of our campus ministers. Jay's a good friend of mine. I appreciate Jay so much. I like working with him. I love his heart for campus students. I love the coffee that he makes. He's really good at it. And I love Jay's story. So I just wanted Jay to come up for a few minutes and we're just going to kind of talk through his story. So Jay, you didn't grow up really going to church much. Faith wasn't a big part of your life. So can you just for a minute tell us what your childhood was like, kind of as it relates to church and faith?
Sure. I actually grew up as a little kid in Rapid City, South Dakota, and my parents went to Catholic school as children, so they thought that was important for us to go to Catholic school. So from kindergarten to third grade, I went to Catholic school, and we went to Mass every week, but my family never went to church together. So I had a knowledge of God as a child. I think more than anything, I feared him as a result of kind of that upbringing. But
so you didn't really grow up active in faith. Let's fast forward to college then. Okay, so college happens. There's an invitation that is extended to you. So tell us about that invitation.
Well, in the summer times, I would work for my father. He had a business, and I was a courier for him. And that meant that I would pick up and drop off at the same places pretty regularly. And there was a young lady who was a receptionist at one of those places, and I had got to know her just, 5 minutes at a time all summer long. And it was the last week before school was starting, and I knew that I was probably not going to see her again. So that conversation sort of ended with, hey, nice to get to know you this summer. Maybe I'll see you again at Christmas break when I work again. And she very quickly said, no, that's not good enough. Here's my phone number. And she was a very beautiful young lady, so that was really easy to give her a phone call. And it wasn't an invitation to church. It was an invitation to watch the Broncos play Monday Night Football at one of her friends' houses. And what happened through that was, unbeknownst to me, that was about half of the campus ministry at the time. It was the Metro Church of Christ in Denver, Colorado. I was at the University of Denver at that time. And I knew immediately there was something different about these people, because my idea of what a college Monday Night Football party should look like was very different than what this one looked like. But it was wonderful. We walked in the door, and everybody ran up to give this young lady I was with a hug. Her name was Rebecca Howard at the time. And I just thought, who are these people? You know, what is this? But long story short, it was a few weeks later that she invited me to church, and I accepted that invitation.
So what was it about that experience at the party that was welcoming, and in fact welcoming enough that you would follow that up with saying yes to an invitation to church?
Sure. Well, I had friends in my life at that time, but none of my friends sort of treated each other the way that I saw these people treating one another. So their relationships were very compelling to me. And in all honesty, as much as I appreciated the invitation to the Monday Night Football, I really did not intend to hang out with those people ever again, because I thought, wow, they've got something really good going, and I will mess it up if I come back into this. So they didn't tell me they were Christians. They didn't have to tell me they were Christians. I just knew. Instinctively, I knew there was something about them that was very different than me, and not. They didn't make me feel bad. This was all on me. But I thought, that's great for them. I wish I had that, but I can't. But there was this nagging sort of, but what if that's real? What if people really have those kinds of relationships with one another? What if people, the way that they welcomed me was incredible to me. What if that was real? And that's what really, when the invitation to church came, I was so curious about all of that I jumped at the chance to go to church with those people.
Yeah. So you went to church with them. Let's finish the story then. How does this end as far as you becoming a Christian?
Well, I studied with the campus minister there for about 4 months. Actually, I didn't want to go to church by myself. So I drug my roommate, Ben, along with me. I was like, I am going to go to church, but I'm not going by myself. Like, you're going to come with me. And he had grown up marginally in faith as a young man, too. He got baptized after a month. So the first person that I invited to church got baptized before I did.
You.
So that worked out pretty well. But really, my journey took a bit longer than his, because I had a ton of questions, very analytical, and I had a lot of things that needed to be answered. But I don't know how I maintained my grades that semester, because so much of it was just being in the Word of God and studying and wanting to know. And really, Josh, what was so compelling and what made me want to study and what made me want to stay was the community that I saw in church. And I have a great family of wonderful parents and siblings. I'd never seen people have a relationship like this. And I thought that I had close friends, and I think what we had to work with, without Christ, I think we were pretty close. But that was it for me. And that's what drove me, and that's what drove me to want to know and want to study.
Yeah. So let me ask you this last question. For all of us who sometimes feel timid about inviting, we don't want to bother people, we don't want to offend them, we don't want to impose on them, is there maybe something you would say to us as a word of encouragement as we think about inviting someone?
Well, I'll say two things. First, everything about my life, from the woman that I married, one person, and actually one invitation. One time where somebody said, no, that's not good enough, here's my number, and inviting me into relationship in person, and actually one invitation. One time where somebody said, no, that's not good enough, here's my number, and inviting me into relationship with her. And when she invited me to church, I want to say this to you guys, and I want you to hear it. There was nothing about that was offensive to me. I didn't take it as, oh, you have something that you think I need. How arrogant of you. It was the most natural thing in the world, because I had already been invited into relationship with a person. So that's what I'd say.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing
Josh.
your story with us. I'm grateful someone invited you, Jay, because I get to work alongside you. I'm very thankful for that. So I want to give you some takeaways. I want some things for you to think about doing. We've put together some things on our website at mrcc.org/invite. You can see kind of what that would look like up here. We've kind of crammed it all on one page so you can see. There's lots of things on there. That web address is in your bulletin. It's all the things over the next few months that we think would be the easiest things to invite someone to. There's a mix of things on there. There's our foster adopt event that I've already talked about. There's our fall festival tonight. There's info about our Capitol Hill ministry, who's serving doing first aid and doing medical help at the open streets down at the Capitol Hill neighborhood today. You might think it's odd to invite someone to serve first, but there's lots of folks that will gladly come and serve and volunteer beside you, even before they start thinking about faith. There's a women's ministry skills night. There's our men's Sharpen, which is a men's dinner coming up in a few weeks. And then we've got lots of things during the holiday season that begin to come up. Our International Thanksgiving dinner. Divorce Care and Grief Share doing their Surviving the Holidays. Christmas Wow that happens in December. The Polar Express movie night that so many kids love. All of the giving and serving projects that happen during the holidays. Special note, I want to let you know kind of our schedule. Sunday, December 24th this year. It falls on Christmas Eve. And so because of kind of responses from you and to accommodate lots of people's travel and family schedule preferences, we're going to have two services on Sunday, December 24th. They're going to be at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Two services where we're going to have communion at both. You can pick one of those. The evening one especially is going to have kind of the feel that some of our devotionals we've had on Christmas Eve before have had. You've got friends who may not go to church much at all, but they might think of a place to go on Christmas Eve. Why don't you invite them to come worship with us on December 24th to come be a part of one of those worship services on Christmas Eve? I might remind us of this principle. And I love the way Terry Fisher says this. I think Phil may have even quoted it in one of his sermons. That an invitation to someone is an ultimate motive, but it's not an ulterior motive. In other words, how we treat a person doesn't change based on how they respond to our invitation. We're not chumming up and trying to be friends with someone just so they'll say yes. That's fake. Right? Jesus didn't say love your neighbor as long as he or she is a Christian or as long as he or she is thinking about becoming one. We love our neighbors no matter what, and we treat people with kindness no matter what. That we're not doing nice things just so they'll say yes to an invitation. But in fact, we do want that to happen. So it's an ultimate motive, but it's not an ulterior one. Let me leave you with a note of confidence as we finish here. These are some statistics from Tom Rainer, who wrote a book in 2003 called The Unchurched Next Door. And I realize the statistics are going to be a little bit dated at this point. And they may be a little bit worse, but they're going to be close to this. Did you know that as he's done interviews with unchurched people, he found that 74% of them are anywhere from neutral to very friendly to Christianity. Only 5% are on the very hostile end. 74 are neutral to very friendly. And 82% say they would be at least somewhat likely to attend if invited. But only 21% of active churchgoers invite anyone to church within a year, and only 2% of us invite an unchurched person. Here's what that means. People are likely to come if they're invited. The problem is we're not likely to invite them. But maybe I would say it this way as a note of encouragement and hope to you. If you invite your one, that person is much more likely to say yes than to be offended. I want you to take that encouragement, that just as we've read in Scripture, as Jesus has invited people and they've invited others, so we are called to invite others to encounter Jesus. And the statistics show we've got a great chance of that being successful. So I want you to look at the board, and I want you to think of your one. And then I want you to take a minute sometime today and look at the website, and I want you to think of something you can invite them to. And hey, give us a heads up that they're coming. We'd love to meet them. Make sure and send one of us on staff an email and say, hey, I'm bringing someone. Can you come by and say hi? We would love to see the people and meet the people that you invite. And speaking of invitations, if you don't know Jesus today, if you need to follow Jesus, I am inviting you, but not just me. Jesus is inviting you to follow him. If today's the day you need to be baptized, we want to do that for you. And if you need the prayers of the church, we want to do that for you. If there's any way that we can serve you today, please let us know while we stand and sing.